Hello internet users, and welcome back to another video. For years now, I've been showing you all how to break Pokemon games in ridiculous ways, and among one of the most popular methods I like to cover is soft locking. For many of the games in this series, there are several points during a playthrough where it's possible to put a save file into an almost unplayable state by playing it in an absurd and unexpected way. Out of all the softlock situations I've covered, though, some of the most interesting setups are the ones that can be done at the very beginning of the game. Pokemon is known for being incredibly easy, so I find it amusing that you can create a save file where it becomes impossible to do something as basic as beating the first youngster in your path. And for today's video, we're going to be doing something just like that in Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. Using nothing but the game's own mechanics, I'm going to show all of you how to make them almost impossible to finish. Without wasting any time, here are the steps on how it's done. First, you need to start a new game and play it normally, making sure to beat every trainer along the way up until you reach the final bug catcher in Viridian Forest. This guy right here is Bug Catcher Sammy, and he is the first non-rival trainer in the game that cannot be avoided. He will always be facing to the left and must be defeated before you can progress to Pewter City. Next, you now need to pick up every item that's currently available. This will not take long, as at this point in the game, the maps you can visit are just Pallet Town, Viridian City, Viridian Forest, and a couple of routes between them all. For this to work, we need to ensure that the player will not have access to anything that can save them, so everything must be collected and tossed so that it can't be used or sold later. This includes all possible hidden items as well, one of which can actually be found on a tile in this bug catcher's line of sight. Once everything has been tossed and you've spent all of your remaining money, your inventory should be mostly empty. At this point in the game, the only other items you can get are useless key items like the town map and Teachy TV. For this setup, it doesn't make a difference if you have them or not. And for the next step, we now need to trade over a Pokemon from another game. In the past, I've done a video with Fire Red and Leaf Green showing how to create a potential soft lock without trading. That particular setup required playing through a bit more of the game since I needed to use a specific Pokemon found in Mount Moon. However, for this video, the goal is to ruin the first mandatory bug catcher. Since the pool of available Pokemon is too small for us to get creative, we need to prepare something on a different save and send it over. In these games, the trade feature becomes available as soon as Professor Oak gives you the Pokedex. However, there are a few restrictions to keep in mind. For whatever reason, these games require the player to finish the post-game story before any Pokemon from outside of the Kanto Dex can be transferred in. This reason right here is why soft-locking Fire Red and Leaf Green can be a bit more complicated than the other Gen 3 games. If the goal is to break them with their own mechanics and restrictions, then the list of usable Pokemon becomes a lot more limited. Luckily for us, there is still a Pokemon in Kanto that perfectly does what I need for this setup. From another save file, I've sent over a level 100 Weezing, whose only known move is Explosion. From that information alone, you might have an idea of where this is going. But don't worry, I can assure you, it's much worse than that. Once we have the Weezing, we next need to release all other remaining Pokemon on this file, and then save the game. With Weezing as our only remaining Pokemon, the game will no longer allow the player to trade anymore. This is because you are required to have at least 2 Pokemon in your party to even enter the room. And because we already threw away all of our items and money, this means it's impossible to buy any more Pokeballs to capture anything else. The only way to get more money and items is to make it past the bug catcher at the end of Viridian Forest. Until this person is beaten, there is quite literally nothing else to do in the game. But with the setup now complete, let me explain why that's now almost impossible. Whenever you enter into a battle with this bug catcher, the only thing you can do is select Explosion, which will make Weezing faint and automatically make you lose the battle. This will force you back to the last Pokemon Center, and because this heals you, that means you'll never be able to use Struggle by depleting Explosion's PP. However, in this battle, it's not always a guarantee that the move will even happen. As you may have noticed by now, because this Weezing is traded, and this save does not have any badges, it's not very obedient. And this right here is why I say this battle is almost impossible. Under normal circumstances, explosion would happen every time you select the move, but due to this specific setup, the player still has a way to escape the ruined save file. Bugcatcher Sammy's only Pokemon is this level 9 Weedle. Its only two moves are Poison Sting and String Shot, which have PP amounts of 35 and 40 respectively. If our Weezing were to disobey for over 75 turns in a row, the Weedle would be forced to use Struggle, and KO itself within a few more turns. Because the Weezing is level 100 and is also immune to being poisoned, it should easily be able to take the damage from all of those hits. This method is the only possible way to win this battle. I don't think I need to tell most of you, though, that having Weezing disobey for that many turns is incredibly unlikely. All it has to do is obey once, and the whole battle ends. However, there are a few things to keep in mind about this situation. Something that commonly happens with disobedient Pokemon is that they will randomly decide to fall asleep during the battle. This is the best possible thing that can happen here, since falling asleep is guaranteed to waste a couple of turns at minimum, and even when it does wake up, it can immediately go back to sleep on the same turn if the RNG makes it. Before you get your hopes up, though, even with this extra help, the chances of Weezing failing to explode this many turns in a row is still extremely unlikely. Disobedience in Pokemon is not as simple as just wasting a turn or two. Sometimes the Pokemon will even inflict damage on itself as if it were confused. And obviously, if this happens enough times, Weezing will faint even if it didn't get to use its attack. Because the battle is required to go on for so many turns, and there are so many possibilities of how it could play out, I can't give an exact chance on how likely the escape is. But of course, I repeated this battle multiple times, recording how far I could get before Weezing finally uses the move. In the overwhelming majority of attempts, Weezing would end up exploding within the first few minutes. There were a few times where the battle would go on a little bit longer, but not once would Weezing ever end up fainting from confusion damage. And as you might have expected, I never even got close to the Weedle using a single struggle. The chance of Weezing going this long without using Explosion is just too low to realistically happen. You could sit here trying for several hours, or even days, and not even get close. In fact, as if the game was trying to give me a sign, on my very first attempt at recording these battles, Weezing ended up using the move on the very first turn. With the save file set up this way, the game can barely be called playable. It's not possible to catch more Pokemon, or find any kind of alternate path around Bugcatcher Sammy. The player's Pokemon journey has come to an end, and there is nothing else to do except to go back home and give up on all their dreams. But do you know what the most ridiculous part of this whole softlock is? If you booted up the game and were guaranteed to get through the battle first try with the most perfect possible RNG, the battle would still take too long to be worth it. In the amount of time it would take you to mash through this obnoxious situation, you could have just started a new game and made it past this trainer before the battle would have concluded on the other save. With this softlock, there is no reason to even go for the technically possible escape. It's way faster and more consistent to just erase everything and end up in the same game state. With all of that said though, I've shown off everything I've wanted to talk about here. My name is Picasbury, and thanks for watching.